And now I have the pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker of this conference. He is a psychologist and a pedagogical consultant. And for many years he has made research of Vygotsky's theories of constructivistic learning, which is a part of Storyline's philosophy. Welcome, Leif Strandberg.
Thank you, Sanna. I have learned that from TV, they say so. Thank you, Sanna. And hi and good morning. And thank you for yesterday's evening. It was a great evening, a great dinner, and a great music band, wasn't it? It was good to dance to them. I'm not a dancer, but with that kind of band, you can dance. And that's a part of the theory today. I think Vygotsky would have loved to listen to that band. What was the name of the band? The Flying Book Roll. Den flygande bokrullen. Okay. I think Vygotsky would have loved that band because he was from a Jewish tradition in Eastern Europe. And I hope he could have listened to that kind of music. He was very classical educated, but I hope when he wanted to have fun, he also could listen to this flygande bokrullen, or whatever they call it in Belarus, in Vitryssland. I also think that Vygotsky should have loved to meet Storyline. I'm not an expert on Storyline, but what I have seen about Storyline in ordinary schools in Sweden, I'm sure that Vygotsky would have loved to meet what I have met in Storyline. Because Vygotsky was a man of culture. Culture is the key word in Vygotsky's theory. He loved films and he loved theater. Theater was his passion. And his hobby was writing reviews about theater. He wrote hundreds of, you say reviews? Recensioner? Yes? This is my PT English, so we have to correct me sometimes. This is an interactive. He loved films and theater and books. So when he created his psychological theory, he gave it the name cultural historical psychology, or as we say in Sweden, socio-cultural theory. So culture is in the middle there. Of course, Vygotsky was inspired by his Western colleagues of psychology, but most of all, Vygotsky was inspired by people from culture. One of his friends, the theaterman Stanislavski, was as a close friend. And Meyerhold was also a well-known director in former Soviet Union. And from the film world, he was a friend of Sergei Eisenstein. You know, he made the big films about the revolution time in Soviet Union. And he was close friends to writers like Boris Pasternak and poets like Mandelstam. And of course, Vladimir Mayakovsky. So this was his background. It was culture. In that time, in the beginning of the 1900s, the 20th century, in psychology, in my profession, there was a big quarrel about where do we find psychological processes? Can we see psychological processes? Can we grasp psychological process? And most of the researchers said, no, because they are inside in the brain. They are inside in the darkness of the brain, so you can't see them. But Vygotsky said, that's bullshit. No, I don't think he said bullshit. He said that because he was a very decent man. He said, of course we can see psychological processes. It's easy to see psychological processes. It's just take a walk in your neighborhood. Take a walk in your village. take a walk in your city. And what do you see? You see houses, you see streets, you see bikes, you see libraries, you see museums, you see factories, you see culture. Who has made all this? Do they come from God? No. It comes from people's creative work. It's people who has done this. This is psychological processes materialized into artifacts, into culture. Psychological processes, they lie as an open book outside. So if you want to understand psychological process, you have to read this open book, because culture and mind, they are connected. Mind is culture. Culture is mind. Mind is internalized culture, and culture is externalized mind. They are connected. So it's easy to see. It's an open book. But if you want to understand psychological processes without reading this open book, you are doing a big mistake, he said. So one of the key words of Vygotsky is culture. But he has more key words. So let's say something more about what I have been most interested of related to Vygotsky. I'm a school psychologist. I've been working in schools and preschools together with children and youth and teachers and pedagogues since 1973. This is my homeland, and I love to be there. And my mission has been to be smart in answering the question, what is learning? How do children learn? And I hoped when I started as a psychologist that this would be an easy question and I could have easy answers to it. But it has taken me a very, very long time to be smart on this question, because it was more difficult than I thought in the beginning. And I have looked in many directions to find out the answers. What is learning? How do children learn? And what role do we, grown-ups, play in their learning? When I worked with this issue for many years, I said to myself, Leif, now you have to really understand what learning is. You must start from the beginning and to make just to understand it. And it had to do with that the Swedish authority, we changed our curriculums in the beginning of the 90s. And the school authority in Stockholm, they came with a very big book, an investigation, a survey, and it was called School. It's impossible to translate this. In Swedish, it was skola för bildning, school for, but the next word is only in Danish and in German and in Swedish. Bildung is a special word, social, cultural development or something like that. And in that book from the state, they said, now we are changing our curriculums, and this time let us be inspired by Vygotsky. This was 92. And when the state said so, I think I thought, now I have the chance to really understand what is Vygotsky. And from that time, I put myself behind a chair. There we have a chair. Yeah. And now I'm trying to make a little baseline of what is learning, how can I understand learning. And as I am a bear with a very little brain, I need to visualize and to make it easy for me to see what is learning. I am like Winnie the Pooh. I have a little brain, so I need to visualize. So I put myself behind this chair, and then I said, Leif, let's say like this. Learning has a starting point. It starts somewhere. And I think it starts at this chair. And I gave this chair a name. I called this chair Cannot. This was the name of the chair. Cannot. And I thought that was an interesting name because the world is big and the child is small and there is a lot of things you don't know. So cannot, that must be a very legitimate and good starting point. I cannot. I was very satisfied with the name of this chair, so I cannot, I was good. But then time goes, things happen, and suddenly, or not suddenly perhaps, but sometime, the child we can find the child sitting on this chair. And of course I gave this chair a name too, and I call this chair Can. Now I have established a baseline here. I thought learning and development has something to do with a movement from cannot to can. From here where I am right now to there where I'm not am right now. And cannot can here and there, and from what I am to what I am becoming. From cannot to can, from here to there, from being to becoming. I was a bit satisfied with this. You are not, I hear that, but let's go. But then came my next question. What makes us move between the chairs? What are the driving forces between the chairs? Why do we want to move from that chair to that chair? Why do we want to take a step further? And in schools and in preschools, what role do pedagogues, teachers have in this movement? Do we play any role at all, or shall we let them free and be laid back, or shall we be in the front or in the back, or where shall we be? Is there a good theory explaining what happens between the chairs? Wouldn't it be nice if it was one good theory saying, this is how it goes. This is which makes us move. So is there one good theory about this? No. You know that. You have also discovered. In my investigation of what is learning and what makes us move, and do we have one good theory? No. We have hundreds of theories trying to explain this, what happens between the chairs. But when I looked at all the smart and less smart theories, I could realize that I saw two tracks, two roads. And one road is Vygotsky Road, the road to Vygotsky. And the other road is also a good road. I call it the Piaget Road, the Piaget track. You remember Piaget? He was a great researcher. He was a great man. He did a great job in the beginning of the 19th century and in the mid and in the end, because he lived so long. He became almost 100 years. He was a light in the darkness when he came. The darkness he defeated was the darkness where we thought about kids as being rats. Children, they are like rats. If we give them a piece of cheese, they run, and if we don't, they don't. And childhood is something unnecessary. The important thing is adulthood. And here comes Piaget and said, no, stop. Children are not rats. Children think. Children are thinkers. This is his great mission. Because it's a very difference to being a rat or a thinker, isn't it? So I think Piaget should have had the Nobel Prize for this. Children are thinkers. And you remember he started to write his famous books about how do a 1-year-old kid think, and a 14-year-old, and a 16-year-old. He wrote book after book after book about how children was thinking in different ages. And these were the books I read when I studied to psychologist. And when I came out on the field in the northern Sweden, even north of where Sanna lives, and I found a real 16-year-old kid. I could compare with what Piaget had said about a 16-year-old thinking. And to my happiness, I said, it matched. Yeah, Piaget said, it matched. And when I look at a 3-year-old kid, yes, it matched. It matched for the kids who were sitting on this chair. It was okay. With it matched between the Piaget schemes and the real life relating to the kids who were successful, who had received all the results, who were sitting on the can chair. The problem for me was that I shouldn't work with the can children. I should work with the cannot children. Those who hadn't moved to this chair, who didn't move. In fact, they moved a lot, but not in direction I don't know. And then I came back to the question, why are some kids sitting here and why are you sitting there? Where are the differences? Why? What do you, Piaget, say about the driving forces? Because what Piaget had done, he had written the optimal results. I don't know the right word, but you understand. What do you say about what happens between the driving forces? And when I looked back in the Piaget book, I saw, oh, you're saying 4 things. First, Piaget is saying, when we approaching the question about what happens between the chairs, the first we must think of is the individual. It has to do with this individual, he said. And for me, when I heard that, I thought it was braha, braha. Because I'm sitting here in the northern part of Sweden, and I'm sitting here together with a boy or a girl, and I wonder, why are you not moving? And Piaget says, it has to do with this individual. Yes, of course. I'm not that stupid. Of course, it has to do with the individual. Can it be something else? Yes, it can be. We will soon come back to that. But now it felt very, very common sense to say so. And then Piaget said, it has to do with something inside the individual. It has to do with something mentally inside. It has to do with the head, and it has to do with maturation. This was what that kind of track were saying. And this was exactly what the teachers, then it was beginning of the 1970s when I worked as a school psychologist, where I worked then. This was exactly what the teachers asked me. They said, Leif, as you are a psychologist, can you take a look inside the head of that boy? Because it must be something wrong inside his head. Because that was the paradigm at that time. If there were some learning problems, where should we look? Yeah, we should look at the kid. And when we're standing near the kid, we should look inside his head. So I started my career by looking inside the heads of the kids. Have you done this? It's not so easy to see. Because in the northern part of Sweden, they have so many caps. And they have so much hair. And the real problem is it is the bone, the skull bone. You don't see anything. And isn't that a pity? Piaget said the driving forces for taking us from that chair to that chair is inside. It is hidden for the psychologist and for the teachers too, and for everybody. What a pity. It would have been easier if we could see something. And it was the same with maturation. They asked me, the teachers, Leif, do you think they are mature to start school? Are they mature to start reading? And I tried to explore the maturation too. The problem is that maturation is a concept from the world of tomatoes. It's easy to see if a tomato is mature. Oh, what a pity. Piaget, he was so great. And then when he wanted to explain the driving forces, what makes us move, he said things that we couldn't do so much about. This track I'm not talking about is very comfortable for grown-ups. Because if something is wrong, we can say, like Pontius Pilatus, I can't do anything more. It's something wrong there. So, okay. But it's interesting that it is exactly here where Vygotsky comes in and have another opinion on exactly these 4 dimensions. So let's hear the voice of Vygotsky. What is it saying when he reading this? Vygotsky and Piaget, they were living at the same time. They were born the same year, 1896. Vygotsky was a teacher in Belarus. Belarus is Vitryssland in Swedish. And Piaget, he has already made an academic career. He's already made his thesis, his doktorsavhandling. Have you read his thesis? It was about the sex lives of the eels. Ålarnas kärleksliv. Because he was a biologist in the book. But both Piaget and Vygotsky, they were most interested in learning and development. And they read, now Vygotsky read what Piaget had written. Because Vygotsky lived in Soviet Union, so it wasn't so easy for him to pay a visit to Switzerland. It was impossible, almost. But they could, in the end of the 1920s and the beginning of the 30s, they could exchange articles, and they could be kind of pen friends. So Vygotsky, he started to write a letter to Piaget in Switzerland. And he said, "Dear Jean," or something like that. "Hi, Jean. I have read all your books about thinking and about how children are thinking. And I must say, wow, it's a great reading. Oh, beautiful books. And I absolutely agree with you of your way of describing abstract thinking and concrete thinking. I have the same opinion as you have." When Piaget received this letter, he said, "Thank you." But as you can hear, Vygotsky has prepared for a continuation. And that continuation starts with but. But. But I have a completely different perspective than you. What happens between the chairs? Oh, do you? Is it possible to say something different than this? Individual, internal, mental, and maturation. Yeah, I have another opinion. Okay, let's hear about it. And now Vygotsky starts to say something about this. So let's hear to Vygotsky. I have some papers. So, the first thing I want to say, says Vygotsky, is has to do. I think it has to do with what we are talking about, maturation. I don't think that the typical feature, you can see where I am in my manuscript here. Yeah, no, the word as well. This is a fusklapp in Swedish. Yeah. Yeah. The most typical feature for a successful pupil in the school, a girl or boy, the most typical feature, yeah, is not what they have in their heads. The most typical feature for successful kids, it is activity. He starts here. It's activity. It's not what you have in your head when you enter the school that is decisive for success. It is what you do when you are in school that is decisive for success. And when I heard this and tried to understand, it's not what you have in your head when you are in the school. It's what you do. Yes, of course, together with your head, because it follows you when you enter the school. When you activity. Every teacher can immediately see this child. The eyes are open, the ears are here, and they are asking, and they're asking questions. What did you say? Oh, can you say it once more? Can we do this? Okay, come on, we do it. You can see it in their body that they are active. For me, it was a relief to see it's not what's in the head. Stop looking inside the head because you don't see anything there. Start looking at their feet. What do they do all day? Have you read the Rich and Scary book? What do people do all day? You know that? Yeah? Vad gör folk hela dagarna? And I started to make a small study. What do children do all the day when they are in school? How much time of a lesson, how much time of a school day or a school week do they spend on activity? And my hopeful hypothesis was, of course, it was 100%. They come to school and the word is big, so they say, okay, I'm here, let's train. So I thought it could be 100%. Time on task, time on activity. Was it 100%? No. It was, when it was its best, it was 50. And what I saw that to my friends here, my comrades here, you know, sitting here, it was 0%. Week after week after week, it was 0% of activity. They were doing nothing. And if Vygotsky is right and said, it is what you do when you're in school. If you don't do anything, that's a pity. So activity is an interesting factor. When Piaget heard this about activity, he said, oh, of course, I think I'm talking about an active child too. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, of course you do. But said Piaget, you are making such a big deal. You say, you use the big words for activity. You say, this is the frame is activity. Yes, I think it's important. Okay, said Piaget, I agree like this, but it's a bit fussy so far. I don't know if the word fussy was in that time, but perhaps in German. Es ist ein bisschen flummig, kanske han sa. So I want to hear more. Okay, said Vygotsky, I'm talking about four activity. This is the world of artifacts, yes. It's amazing. I'm talking about four types of activities. It's interaction, it has to do with artifacts, tools and science, and context, room, and creativity. Oh, let's hear about them. The first thing I want to start with, says Vygotsky, is about interaction. You, Piaget, you say that it has to do with the individual. Yes, of course it has to do with the individual. Doesn't it have to do with the individual? And then Vygotsky steps forward and said, niet. Oh, okay. Of course, it has to do with the individual. But it is like this, dear Jean Piaget. A child learn one thing 2 times. What? Yeah. I can take the exact quotation from Vygotsky here. Every function in a child's culture development appears twice. It's first on the social level and then later on the individual level. If you are sitting here on the cannot chair, if you cannot, there is no other way if you want to reach can than to look around and see if you can see another man, another person, another friend, and you have to come closer, and you have to connect, and you have to follow, and you have to be together with a friend who can. Because every learning starts as a social activity. It takes 2 to learn, 2 or 3 or 4. It's a social activity which is in the beginning. What Vygotsky says here is very comforting. Yes, yeah. He says, if you don't have it inside your head, don't worry. Because you can borrow competence from a clever friend. And of course, the teacher, the pedagogue, is this clever peer, this clever friend. But, says Vygotsky, it works also, it works with a friend from the class as well. The only important thing is that there is a difference. Vygotsky is a friend of differences, of diversity, of heterogeneity. Because you only borrow things that you don't have. You don't borrow things that you have. You don't knock on the neighbor's door and trying to borrow sugar if you have sugar. If you do that, you are looking for something else. But that's okay too. That's okay too. But it hasn't with sugar to do. So you understand. And Vygotsky is very sharp here. He says, you don't only can borrow, you must borrow. Because there are no other ways to approach and to get knowledge than interaction. It takes two to learn. So the question in practical pedagogy is, with whom are you going to work with this? In Sweden we have something called EUP. Do we have EUP in Belgium? We are working to promote learning with individual developmental plans. And one important question is here, with whom shall you take this step? With whom? Together with whom? Together with whom? Yeah, you cannot take a new step by yourself. You have to be with friends. When Piaget heard this, he said, no, no, it starts in the individual. This is their main, their big quarrel in the end of 20s and the beginning of 30s. Does it matter if it starts with the individual or together? Is it a typical academic question or is it something practical? Yes, it matters. We see two completely different classrooms if we think it starts as something together or if we start with something that matures inside. Of course, two different classrooms. Piaget, he didn't say, I don't agree. Do you have anything else to see? Yes. I have artifacts. Yes, what is artifacts? You, Piaget, you say it has to do with the head. Yes, of course, has it to do with the head because the brain is inside the head. Doesn't it have with the brain to do learning? And Vygotsky says, niet. He says so because he wants to provoke a little bit. Of course, he said, it has to do with the brain. But what is a brain? What is a human brain? What is the typical feature of a human brain? The brain of Homo sapiens. Yeah, the typical feature of our brain is that we have transported so much brain outside the brain. What? Yeah, we have transported brain outside the brain. There are pictures inside the head in the brain. Of course, we have pictures of things. But human beings, we have also been eager to put pictures on the walls, in the caves, and everywhere. Everything which is in the brain is also outside the brain. We have memory in the brain, yes, of course. But we also have made, here in Sweden, we have made yellow post-it notes. And we're putting this on the wagons when we go into the store to shop. Do you have this in other places too? Yeah? You know, my wife, she writes on this post-it note, 1 liter milk and a small butter and 6 eggs. And then she makes a small parenthesis and she said, and no beer, she says. So I followed it. And what Vygotsky says is that it's easier to learn if we both can have it in your head and have it in your hand. It's easier to learn if you can have it in your hand too. You can take one step further. if you have a tool in your hand. Last summer I met a musician. I'm not a musician. I sit on cannot chair and said, oh, I can't play guitar. I'm not a musician at all. No. I'm not a dancer either. And this friend, he comes from Gothenburg, from Göteborg here, and his name is Sten. He's not only a musician, he's also a tool maker. He makes instruments that are good for licensed psychologists and other handicapped people. So he has made a guitar called bygelgitarr. Have you heard of the bygelgitarr? It's a kind of grip guitar. Okay, I will tell you about the grip guitar because it's interesting. I can't play guitar. And this friend Sten, he said, aren't you, Leif, going all around the country and talking about the theory that are saying that people can perform a head taller if they had the right tool in their hand? Yes, I said, it's called the sociocultural theory of Vygotsky, and this part is called the mediating artifacts. I said, okay. Does this theory work for you too? He said. Yes, it works for everyone. I said, okay, so take a seat on the can chair, he said. But I can't. Now you're sitting here. And then he put this guitar he's made. Grip guitar. Can it be so? A grip, is that something? Yeah? Yeah. Good. Grip guitar. Bygelgitarr. It's a real guitar. It's not a plastic karaoke machine that you put and then it plays by itself. You have to play on it. And then he said, this comrade Sten, my friend Sten Bunne, he said, take this plectrum and then you play 4 times on the strings. And I have played on guitars before and it has not been any success. But this time when I played 4 times with this plectrum on the strings, I said, wow, it sounds beautiful. And Sten said, yes, I know, because I have transported competence. I have built in a chord, a D chord, in the guitar, in the low strings. That's why it's beautiful immediately. So play with it. And I said, oh, this is beautiful. And it's fun, I said. But after some minutes, I said, it's beautiful, it sounds good, but isn't it a bit monotonous in the long run? I know, he said, but don't worry, I have built in more competence in the guitar. And now I come to the grip. If you see on the guitar neck, you can see I have made a little grip. And if you take this grip and then you put it this way and you play with the plectrum, and I did that, and I said, wow, this sounds good too, but a little bit different. Then he was impressed that I could hear that it was a difference. It's another chord, he say. And then I took it here, and it was beautiful, and it was another chord, and then it was here. It was 3 positions. And when I played with this, and it was so fun, it was driving a car. It was so fun. And I saw it was different colors. It was green in that direction, it was red here, and yellow here. It was funny. But then, when I have been playing like this, I asked my friend, you as a professional guitar player and musician, do you have any rules when you are changing, or can you change whenever you want to change this grip? And immediately when I asked that silly question, there came a lady from somewhere. I didn't know where she came from, but she came and she had a green cloth. And she waved with a green cloth in front of me and my friends. This was an ensemble called Happy Hudik. Do you know Glada Hudik? It's a... You are from Hudik? Yeah, and you know Sten Bunne, of course. So you can take a rest on. So Happy Hudik is a very famous Swedish theater group. And the members of Happy Hudik, they are, in Swedish we call them utvecklingsstörda. I don't know the politically correct name in children with severe learning problems or adults. Do you understand what it is? People with Down syndrome and so on. So I was sitting here with my comrades, and she was waving with the green cloth. And so stupid isn't Happy Hudik or I. So we don't understand. When she's waving green, we are playing green. And then come another lady, and she was waving with a red cloth, and we played red. And with this help, we played, the whole afternoon, we played Born to be Wild. And we also recorded in a video, so you can go home to Hudik and watch the video. And now comes the important school question. You know, in Sweden we have worked very lot with grades and results and things like this. Kunskap and bedömning. Now comes the important question. Can Leif play guitar? Or can't he play guitar? On which chair shall we put Leif? Now, if you watch the video, I'm sure you say, oh, there's Leif. He can play guitar. But if you give me this guitar now, and I'm sitting here by myself now, and you say, oh, no. No, he can't. This is the magic of Vygotsky, because he said, cannot and can. They are not two different planets. They are siblings. They are connected. And in my theory, he says, you can do what you cannot do together with friends, together with friendly tools. This guitar, for example. You can perform a head taller. This is what Vygotsky calls a zone of development. So in learning and development, cannot is not a problem. Cannot is not a defect. Cannot is a ticket to learning. Because you can do what you cannot do. That is the revolution of Vygotsky. It's magic. But it's not magic. Because it's very easy to see. Together with. Okay. Okay, said Piaget, this was interesting. Have you anything more? Yeah, I have something I call room. What is room? Or context. You, Piaget, you say that it has to do with the inside. Yeah. Doesn't it have to do with the inside? And you understand, Vygotsky says, no, he says yes this time. But he says, different things happen inside in relation to where I am. Where is an important question in learning and development. Where are you? Different rooms, different situations, different contexts, influences, different things to do. You think differently in this room, and in another room, another thing happens. Because thinking and learning is contextualized, is situated. If I, for example, Leif, one Sunday tomorrow, I pay a visit to a church room. And I'm sitting in a church. I soon realize that my brain starts to think about things I haven't thought about for many weeks. Inside me, I come in contact with things I had forgotten. And I also start to think of things that I don't want to think about. I try to resist. I don't want to think about this. But a church room is a strong room. The walls are talking to me. The windows, the smell, the acoustic is talking to me. So it's hard to resist. So now I'm sitting there thinking of the sin and shame and guilt. It's hard to be in some rooms sometimes. But the ceremony is rather long, so in the end, I'm starting to think about forgiveness. So when I go step out of the room, it's a great room, it's a tough room. If I, in the afternoon, take my car and I go 50 kilometers from Piteå to Luleå and visit another room, and this room is called Coop Arena. In Coop Arena, they play hockey. And now Luleå Hockey, they are playing against Skellefteå. That's the worst thing. Or Modo. When I'm standing there in Coop Arena room, I can hear myself no longer thinking of forgiveness. And I can hear I'm saying words I didn't know even was inside me. Kill, kill, kill. And it's interesting, amazing, because it's the same brain in the morning as in the afternoon. No, says Vygotsky, learning is situated, thinking is situated. It's because of that it's easier to learn German in Germany than in Russia. It's easier to become a car engineer in a car workshop than it should be in a swimming pool. But it's easier to learn to swim if we have water. Isn't it? The last thing I was talking about, my first swimming instructor, she didn't know that. I was a small kid, and I had thought that the swimming has to do with water, and it has to do with lying flat under the surface, but it was not water, it was land. And it was not lying flat, it was sitting in a very odd position like this. And then we also said an arithmetical formula between us. I said to my peers, 3, 4, and they said 3, 4. And that summer, I didn't learn swimming. The next summer, we were allowed to go into the water, and then I realized that Vygotsky was right. It's easier in different contexts. So these are 3 of my activity dimensions. And what is very, very good with this dimension is that this is something we can do something about. We can't do something about maturation and what's inside your head because we are not neurosurgeons. And even if we were, we couldn't do it anyway, so it can help them learn. But these are dimensions that we can do something about. Rooms. One important room is the imaginary room. And now we're back to the theater room. And I think we're back to what you and Storliner do. You're creating a room where we can perform, we can pretend that we are. This was his main interest. I started with that. The imaginary room. Creativity. I would have said something about creativity, but I see that it's over. I can say something about creativity. I said, what can I say? Creativity is important. Vygotsky was interested in children's play. And for myself, I have made connections between children's play and what I think you are doing in Storyline. One day, we can see that small children, they do like this. They lean a chair on the floor like this. And you can see that they are leaning the chair with a purpose, that they are doing it very carefully. And now they are standing around the chair and they are looking at the chair. But after a while, they are not only looking at the chair, they are looking through the chair, beyond the chair, and simsalabim, it's no longer a chair. It's a boat. And this is per se a very, very revolutionary action from the child. They are entering a world of thoughts They're entering the world of imaginations. They're entering a world of abstracts. This is so important for learning abstract thinking, the play that transforms a chair to a boat. And we can say so much about it. It's an important cognitive purpose. But I want to say something about another aspect of this chair. When the child or the children, when they climb aboard, when they go into the boat, something extraordinary happens. Inside the boat, the child is different. Inside the boat, the child is stronger. The child inside the boat, the child is more brave. And inside the boat, the child can talk more languages. Inside the boat, the child can talk English. Houston, Houston, we got the problem here, we got the problem here. Here we see the Pirates of the Caribbean. Inside this room, this imaginary room, they can use what they have heard in somewhere else. And here it is where Vygotsky say, in play, says Vygotsky, it is as if the child perform a head taller than he or she is. It's fantastic. You can be better in the play, in the imagination. And I think this has connection with storyline. I don't know, but I think so. One day when I saw children playing, I thought it was a boat or something. When the play was over, I talked to a little boy and said, the captain in the boat, in the ship, he was a brave captain. Because you can imagine that it was pirates, it was sharks, and was lots of adventures in this story. The captain in the boat, he was a brave captain, I said. And the boy said to me, yeah. And I asked him, are you that brave too? And the boy answered, no. No. And then I asked him, do you think that you can borrow some courage from the captain? And the boy, he thought a while and said, I think I could because it's me. So that is the comfort with Vygotsky. The revolution with Vygotsky is that you are not isolated. You never walk alone in the zone of proximal development. You are together, and together with friends, with artifacts, in rooms, in play, in imaginary situation, you can perform a head taller. Isn't that good? Thank you for listening.